Let's look at the variable parameters file, and we're going to be able to deal with a variable number of parameters that can be passed to our functions. So if we look down into the file here, we see that we have a function called getAverage. Well, we have this internal local variable that's going to say, let's get the total. Okay? So now we have $count, which is going to use this built-in function, which is going to return the number of arguments, the number of parameters that were actually passed to this function. It's smart enough for that. So you ask yourself, well, we don't really have any parameters here. So what are you talking about? Well, there's a logical explanation to that. And we'll take a look further down. We're going to echo out the count to show how many parameters were passed. And then we're going to loop in this for loop. And we're going to go to that count. How many parameters were passed to that function? Because when we actually call the function, we're actually going to put parameters on that list, as you can see down here. That's what we're going to do in different ways as well. All right, so in the for loop, we're going to use another function called func_get_arg. And this is important. This is going to actually return the value that we need based on what parameter we want to look at. And that's just another function. So we're using func_num_args and func_get_arg in unison to get the count, and then it's going to get the particular argument that we're looking for based on this. So it starts at 0 and works its way up, incrementing by 1. All right, so we want to make sure that value was set, because you didn't necessarily have to pass a value on that argument list. You could have ignored it. You might have seen that we've ignored parameters here and there. So that might have been ignored. We want to make sure it was set. If it wasn't set, we're going to automatically set it to a value of 0. That's important. Is set's important. We'll see that more in the web videos, forums, and things like that. So now we're going to echo this out and say that we're going to add this number in. And now we increment the total based on that value. So we're going to get an average and get a total here. So that's the total. A bunch of numbers added together is the total. And then the average is going to be the total divided by the count. And that brings back the average. Now we could just return that, but we're going to return the variable itself. And that's how that works. Nice and neat. Now down here, we can see how we're going to call things. So we set this up. And the last one's a negative number, just to let you know that. And we also skip 6. We don't give 6 a value. 6 isn't set. Now we're going to set the amount with getAverage, and we're going to pass those parameters in. But you notice that we didn't have any parameters there, just to refresh. We didn't have any parameters there, but because we're passing them now, we're accounting for them, and we're going to be dealing with a variable number of parameters. Notice that most of these are passed as variables. This one isn't. It's just in line here. And then we can get the amount here, because amount's going to be returned. So looking at this particular example, we'll refresh. There you see, there are 8 numbers. It's going to add them together. Notice when it gets to 6, it's a 0. We didn't pass 6, or we did pass 6, but 6 didn't have a value. It was never set. So we're actually calling the isSet. If we comment that out and refresh, you can see adding has no value. Doesn't change anything, but it has no value there. We want to set it to something, and this is good for certain kinds of validations to do isSet. We'll see that later as well. And isSet itself is another function. All that together, and guess what? The average of the numbers is 1250. It does it for us. Gives us the total and then divides by 8. There we go. Variable parameter lists. They definitely come in handy if you've done any type of programming where you do command line programs that have the ability to accept parameters. Then you are aware that this is how things can work, and you might need to study this a little bit more just to get the hang of it. We add a few more functions that you might not be used to, and we do a little bit more involved work here, but for the most part, you get the idea. You can have as many as you like. You can also force parameters to be there by adding a parameter here, and that forces that parameter to be included there, but it changes the effect here a little bit, so you can have both. It's up to you.